Losing a soulmate is a heartbreak I wouldn't wish on anyone, not even those I least admire. My name is Amy, and the sadness of losing my husband came just 3 years after our wedding vows. Our life together was blissful. I had left my job because I had a high-risk pregnancy and was eager to welcome our baby girl. However, destiny had cruel plans. My husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he bravely fought for 4 months before passing away. During his illness, we moved in with my in-laws, Carol and William. They supported us as best as they could. I was grateful they provided us shelter when we couldn't afford our own place anymore. After my husband died, I hoped for continued emotional support from them, but I was sadly mistaken. The warmth they once showed turned cold right after the funeral. Carol and William started treating me and my unborn child as burdens. I told them I planned to find a job and help financially, but they didn't care. Money wasn't a problem since my sister-in-law Angela, who had a good job, was covering all the expenses. Still, my in-laws remained distant, saying I wasn't welcome and didn't deserve their help. William bluntly told me that to them. My connection with their family ended with their son's death. Desperate, I begged them to let me stay a few more days, especially because of my risky pregnancy. My father-in-law shockingly suggested abortion as a solution, and Carol didn't object. Their hostility reached a peak when they tricked me into going to an abortion clinic, pretending it was a health checkup. Realizing what was happening, I protested and left. Returning to their house was difficult, but I realized I needed to find a new path for myself and my unborn daughter, away from the toxic environment my in-laws had created. Overwhelmed with grief and shock, I was devastated by their insistence on terminating my pregnancy. When they returned, they were furious and demanded I get an abortion. They said they had no intention of supporting me or my unborn child now that their son was gone. I tried to remind them that the baby was their grandchild, but they ignored me. Their ultimatum was harsh: either leave or get an abortion. The reality of their rejection hit me hard, especially so soon after my husband's death. Carol forcefully escorted me out, ignoring my protests and the danger it posed to my pregnancy. Outnumbered and worried for my baby's safety, I had no choice but to leave. Standing on their porch, I was in despair, realizing I had nowhere to go and no financial support. I reminded them of the sacrifices I had made, believing we were family, but they didn't care. They denied any family connection to me or the baby, saying they didn't want a granddaughter, and accused me of trying to manipulate them with the baby's existence. Their cruel words suggested that without their support, our survival didn't matter to them. These were among the last heartless words they said before shutting the door, leaving me isolated without even basic necessities or important documents. In that moment, I faced the harsh reality of their complete rejection and indifference towards me and their grandchild. Sitting on the porch, enveloped in despair, I felt utterly shattered and powerless. After crying uncontrollably for about 30 minutes, Carol and William confronted me again, demanding to know why I was still there and insisting I leave their property immediately. They threatened to call the police if I didn't leave, which was the final push I needed to understand they were serious. Fearful for my safety and that of my unborn child, and knowing I had no legal standing since my name wasn't on the lease, I gathered my strength and began to walk away, tears streaming down my face. I walked a few blocks, feeling lost and overwhelmed. I decided to call Angela, holding on to a sliver of hope that she might offer me some support. As soon as she answered, my emotions, amplified by pregnancy hormones, burst forth uncontrollably. Somehow, through my sobs, I managed to tell her where I was but couldn't say much more. Angela, alarmed by my distress, quickly came to pick me up. Angela's home became a safe haven for me. She gently comforted me, reminding me to try and control my tears for the baby's sake. She didn't ask for details, but focused on helping me feel better, even preparing food and a smoothie to calm me down. Once I was somewhat calmer, Angela, with a serious tone, urged me to tell her what had happened. Her assurance of support, no matter what, was comforting to me. I hesitated, knowing that her parents were involved in my problems might change things between us. "Angela, something significant happened. It's about your parents," I managed to say, bracing for her reaction. Angela's response was a moment of silence, a pause that felt like an eternity as she processed what I said. Her promise to support me, especially knowing I carried her niece, was strong. But the news that her parents were at the heart of my despair tested that promise. As I hesitantly revealed her parents' involvement in my troubles, I feared Angela might be upset with me for accusing them. But her reaction, after a brief pause, was one of concern and openness. She assured me in a gentle tone that my fears of offending her were unfounded and encouraged me to share my ordeal. When I confessed that her parents had not only kicked me out, but also tried to force me into having an abortion, her shock was clear. The revelation seemed almost unbelievable to her, a stark contrast to the image she had of her family. Angela's confusion deepened as I detailed how her parents had even taken me to a clinic to try and make me have an abortion. This plan was stopped only by the understanding staff at the clinic. I could see the turmoil of shock and disbelief in her eyes as she processed my words, struggling to reconcile them with the parents she knew. Her disbelief turned to horror as I explained their motive: fear of financial and caregiving responsibilities for me and my child. Despite my assurances of independence and my plans to find work, they remained unmoved. Angela's astonishment grew as I disclosed the financial deceit over my husband's supposed medical bills, a lie that stripped me of the last of my resources. Angela was adamant that no such debts existed. She had personally taken care of her brother's expenses to ensure her parents weren't financially burdened. Realizing that her parents had tricked me into giving up the little money left by my late husband hit me hard, bringing back my tears. It was a cruel lesson in their greed and callousness, exploiting my vulnerability for their gain. Angela's silence showed her shock and dismay at her parents' actions that betrayed not just me, but the memory of their son. After giving me space to express my grief, Angela's response was full of empathy and apology. Although she struggled to grasp the full extent of their betrayal, her support at that moment was a small light in the overwhelming darkness of my situation. I said to her, "I haven't had the chance to tell you about the financial aspect of things, Angela," to which she replied, "Please, you don't need to apologize." I told Angela, overwhelmed by her generosity, "You've already done so much by covering the medical expenses. Without your help, I would have been buried in debt." Angela's actions were the perfect example of family support, a stark contrast to her parents' selfishness. She admitted that she always knew her parents prioritized their own desires, but never imagined they would go so far as to deny me a temporary home until I could support myself. Angela's disbelief turned into determination as she insisted that I wasn't alone and promised that her parents' actions wouldn't go unchallenged. She decided to confront them directly over the phone because she needed to hear their justification firsthand. Not because she doubted my story, but because she wanted to understand their reasoning. During the call, Angela's straightforward questioning about why they threw me out revealed their true nature. Their defense was weak. They claimed they had no intention of causing harm, yet they couldn't explain why they insisted on such a drastic action against their grandchild. Angela's anger was clear as she demanded an explanation. Her parents' attempts to justify their actions only deepened the wound. Listening to them try to rationalize what they did was heartbreaking. Even when faced with their daughter's outrage, William and Carol stuck to their excuses, insisting on their right to a carefree retirement undisturbed by the needs of their late son's family. They claimed they had done enough by caring for their son in his final months, viewing their sacrifices as sufficient reason to avoid any further responsibility. Their words painted a clear picture. In their eyes, their comfort in retirement was more important than the needs of their grandchild and me. This chilling revelation underscored their willingness to abandon their family for the sake of their own ease, a stance that Angela strongly opposed. Her loyalty and support offered a glimmer of hope amidst the bleakness of their rejection. Hearing Carol and William's words was like a blow to my already fragile state. They were adamant about persuading Angela to abandon me, portraying me as a burden who would exploit her kindness. Their harsh advice to Angela to leave me to fend for myself on the streets, suggesting it would bring me to my senses, was unbelievably cruel. Their words plunged me into despair, fearing for my future and that of my unborn child. But just as I felt the weight of hopelessness, Angela's response ignited a spark of hope. She challenged her parents with fierce protectiveness, questioning their humanity and the values they claimed to uphold. Angela reminded them of the financial support she had provided, which allowed them to retire comfortably, highlighting the irony in their claim of hard work. Her anger showed her disbelief in their actions and intentions. Carol and William tried to justify their stance by framing it as a financial safeguard for Angela, even suggesting they'd lie to cover up their demand to kick me out. Angela met this with unwavering refusal. She declared she would not mimic their heartlessness, expressing her shock and disgust at their lack of empathy and familial duty. Angela's defense of me and her outright rejection of her parents' manipulative tactics revealed her strong character and the genuine bond she felt with me, akin to that of a sister. Her fierce response to their demands and her readiness to stand against them showed her strength and resolve to protect what she believed was right, regardless of the personal cost. Her parents' attempts to impose their will were met with Angela's firm refusal to conform to their heartless demands, challenging their motives and ethics. Angela's stance not only defended me, but also upheld the memory of her brother, reflecting her deep love for him and respect for the family ties her parents were so quick to dismiss. Her courage and integrity in the face of such family adversity were a beacon of hope in what felt like an endless night. Angela's bold declaration that she would cease her financial support was a significant turning point, leaving William and Carol shocked. They had never anticipated that Angela would take such a drastic step in my defense. Even I was surprised by Angela's determination to stand up for me so firmly. William and Carol were in disbelief, unable to grasp the reality that Angela was serious about redirecting her support from them to me and my unborn child. Their reaction to Angela's stance was a mixture of confusion and denial, questioning if she really intended to cut them off financially over what they dismissively called a stupid woman. Angela's resolve was unshakable. She corrected them, emphasizing my importance and her commitment to support me and her future niece instead of funding the comfortable lifestyle of her parents, who were more than capable of managing on their own. Her declaration marked an end to their exploitation of her generosity, signaling a new priority: my well-being and that of my baby. This stance by Angela left William and Carol scrambling, their earlier confidence dissolving into panic as they faced the real possibility of having to fend for themselves financially. They attempted to backtrack quickly from their initial demand for my departure to a sudden willingness to welcome me back, which was a clear sign of their desperation. They even went so far as to retract their insistence on abortion, suggesting a newfound readiness to figure things out. Angela then passed the decision to me, her smile signaling a power shift. It was my moment to address the situation, to highlight their wrongful actions and seek accountability. Calmly, I voiced my doubts about their sincerity, pointing out their egregious behavior and the lack of a genuine apology. Confronted with this, William and Carol hastily offered their apologies, a stark contrast to their previous stance. They expressed regret for their actions and extended an invitation for me to return, promising to make amends. This sudden change of heart was a testament to Angela's influence and the realization that their financial stability was at stake. The situation underscored the power of standing united against unfairness and manipulation, shifting the dynamics in a way that demanded respect and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Struggling with mixed feelings, I confronted William and Carol about the deceitful way they had manipulated me out of my late husband's money, despite Angela covering all the bills. Their scheme had unraveled, revealing their dishonesty and exploitation at a time when I was most vulnerable. Seizing the moment, I demanded the return of the money they had unjustly taken, emphasizing that they had no right to it given their lack of support during my husband's illness. Reluctantly and likely feeling cornered, William and Carol quickly refunded the money through PayPal. Then, they reached out to Angela, suggesting a return to normalcy, as if a financial repayment could erase their wrongdoings. They even proposed setting up a nursery, attempting to lure me back with promises and pretenses of family unity. However, their assumption that a simple apology and refund would mend fences was misplaced. Their expectation of forgiveness, despite their initial willingness to disown me and my unborn child, was a testament to their entitlement. They seemed to believe these gestures were sufficient for reconciliation, overlooking the depth of the hurt they had caused. Firmly, I rejected their notion of family and forgiveness. Their actions, particularly their attempt to coerce me into an abortion, were unforgivable. The audacity to suggest that my daughter would want them in her life after they had so clearly rejected her was appalling. I made it clear that my child did not need such grandparents, emphasizing that their initial rejection and subsequent superficial apologies could not undo the harm they had inflicted. Angela stood by me, reiterating my lack of forgiveness and reaffirming her decision to withdraw her financial support from them. This decision was not taken lightly, but was a direct consequence of their actions and their failure to truly acknowledge the gravity of their wrongdoing. William and Carol's reaction to this finality was one of desperation. Their pleas for us to reconsider, driven by the sudden reality of facing financial responsibilities without Angela's support, were pitiful. Their earlier confidence evaporated, leaving them to reckon with the consequences of their actions, a fitting end to their manipulative attempts to control and discard us according to their whims. Watching William and Carol face the consequences of their actions was both tough and satisfying. They tried to make us feel guilty, but it didn't work. Angela decided enough was enough. She was going to collect my things and then cut ties with them. She even said she'd bring the police to make sure they couldn't keep any of my stuff. True to her word, Angela arrived with a police officer who turned out to be her boyfriend, a surprise to us all. Despite their pleas, I had moved on and blocked them. Angela didn't stop there. She told her whole extended family about what had happened. They were appalled by William and Carol's behavior and rallied around me instead. In the time leading up to my daughter's birth, I was wrapped in a cocoon of love and support. I landed a job through a friend, set to start once daycare was sorted for my little one. For now, I'm staying with Angela, who's been encouraging me to save up for a house to secure our future. Her boyfriend has been an incredible support system. I managed to get a restraining order against William and Carol, thanks to statements from the abortion clinic, ensuring they stayed away from my child and me. My baby girl is healthy and blessed with her father's dark eyes. Seeing them for the first time brought tears to my eyes, and Angela has been my rock through this, choosing to sever ties with her parents permanently. Life took a turn for William and Carol. They've downsized to a small apartment and had to return to work because of financial strain. It seems karma has come full circle, placing them in the very situation they wished upon me.
"Please wake up," I whispered, gazing at my husband's serene face as he lay in his casket. His peaceful expression almost fooled me to thinking he was merely asleep, ready to stir at any moment. "Well, off I go," his cheerful voice echoed in my mind, bidding farewell to me and our daughter before embarking on his business trip just 2 days prior. Little did I know it would be the last time I hear his voice. His sudden departure from this world by his own hand left me in disbelief. No matter how desperately I called out to him, he remained silent, his once warm presence now as cold as ice. As I struggled to come to terms with the grim reality, something caught my eye, a solitary photograph resting on his chest. It was a family picture, but one I didn't recall placing there. Who could have placed it, and why? Intrigued and unnerved, I picked up the photo, turning it over to find a chilling message scrawled on the back. "Run away now." A shiver ran down my spine as I turned to find my mother-in-law's cold gaze fixed upon me. In that moment, I realized I had unwittingly stumbled into a nightmare from which there was no easy escape. I'm Bella, 32 years old, and my journey through life has been marked by both tragedy and love. Losing both my parents in a car accident while I was still in college left me feeling utterly alone in the world. The weight of grief seemed insurmountable. Fortunately, John, my boyfriend at the time, became my pillar of support. After graduating, we tied the knot, finding solace and happiness in each other's company. Our little family expanded with the arrival of our daughter, Hannah, who brought immeasurable joy into our lives. Our family circle extended to include my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, forming a tight-knit support system. Sadly, the passing of my father-in-law a year ago left a void in our hearts. His sudden demise, attributed to what was initially termed an illness but revealed to be a fatal heart attack, shook us all profoundly. Despite the loss, financial worries never haunted us, thanks to the prosperous business my in-laws managed. Originally, my father-in-law had envisioned his capable and compassionate younger brother taking the reins as CEO. However, fate intervened, claiming him before his plans could materialize. Consequently, the responsibility fell upon my brother-in-law, the eldest son, to lead the family's business legacy forward. Dad wanted me to take over, but I couldn't possibly do that over my older brother. "I'll support him." My husband's reverence for his brother ran deep, leading him to gracefully step aside from the CEO position. His respect for family hierarchy was unwavering. My brother-in-law, in turn, displayed a genuine kindness towards me, often engaging in friendly conversations. While our bond blossomed, my interactions with my mother-in-law were marked by a noticeable strain. Initially, my mother-in-law extended warmth towards me, even bonding over cooking sessions, expressing how much she cherished our time together. Her affectionate gestures painted a picture of familial harmony. However, with my father-in-law's passing, a frosty silence enveloped her demeanor. Both my husband and I felt the chill of her withdrawal, her once warm gaze now evading ours. Even our daughter, Hannah, accustomed to adoration as the first grandchild, faced her grandmother's icy reception, met with disapproving glances and curt responses. "She used to be such a sweet person before," my husband lamented, his disappointment palpable. Witnessing his distress, my heart ached with sympathy. "Something seems off about Mom," my husband voiced his concerns, furrowing his brows in deep contemplation. "She's glaring at me as if I'm her enemy. Could she think we're after her assets? Or maybe she's unwell?" Despite his introspection, he couldn't pinpoint a plausible explanation for her sudden change in demeanor. The shift first became apparent during my father-in-law's one-week memorial service. Exhausted from the solemn proceedings, we sought respite at her home. However, our tranquility was shattered when we awoke to find our bag of clothes missing from the room. Could it be a burglary? I pondered aloud, but the selective disappearance of our belongings cast doubt on that theory. As we scoured the house, a plume of smoke billowed from the backyard, drawing our attention. To our disbelief, we discovered our possessions ablaze, and there stood my mother-in-law. "Mom, did you do this?" we implored, seeking an explanation for her inexplicable actions. but she remained silent, her wide-eyed gaze and trembling hands betraying her fear. "Why, Mom? What have we done to deserve this hostility?" We pleaded for answers, but her lips remained sealed, leaving us grappling with uncertainty and confusion. Despite her stoic silence, John extended a hand of understanding to his mother, his voice laced with gentle reassurance. "You're not worried about us going after your assets, are you? I'm not interested in your possessions. Please believe me, mother-in-law. We only want what's best for you." However, our pleas fell on deaf ears as mother-in-law icily commanded, "Leave, both of you, and don't return." With heavy hearts, we departed, our once close bond with her fractured, reduced to mere remnants of what it once was. For the past year, we maintained a distant relationship. Our attempts at reconciliation met with resistance from mother-in-law's unwavering animosity. Then, out of the blue, a message from my brother-in-law beckoned us to the first anniversary memorial service for my father-in-law. Despite mother-in-law's continued coldness, we decided to attend, hoping for a glimpse of reconciliation. Yet her aloofness persisted, serving as a painful reminder of the chasm that now separated us. Witnessing John's contemplative expression amid the familial discord, I couldn't help but wonder about the thoughts brewing in his mind. "What's on your mind, John? Are you concerned about your mother?" I inquired softly, sensing the weight of his thoughts. With a gentle touch, John reassured me, "Don't worry, Bella. If there's anything troubling you, just let me know." His tender gesture, brushing away my worries, brought a sense of calm to my troubled heart. His comforting presence was a balm to my anxieties. A month passed, filled with the familiar routines of family life. As John prepared for another business trip, his cheerful demeanor lifted our spirits. However, his sudden return caught me off guard. With a small charm in hand, he bestowed upon me a gesture of protection. His smile, warm and reassuring, filled me with gratitude for the love we shared. Yet the tranquility was shattered by a harrowing turn of events. The next day brought the shocking news of John's untimely death. His lifeless body was discovered in his car on a remote mountain road near my parents' home in Colorado. The circumstances surrounding his demise puzzled and devastated me. Contrary to his claims of a business trip, there were no scheduled engagements. Instead, his final moments were marked by a heart-wrenching call to my brother-in-law, confessing unbearable pain and a desire to end his suffering. The revelation left me reeling with guilt and confusion. I blamed myself for failing to recognize his anguish, grappling with unanswered questions and an overwhelming sense of loss. Beside his lifeless form, I felt my strength waning, but my brother-in-law's steadfast support steadied me in the face of despair. "Stay," he urged, his presence a beacon of solace in the darkness of grief. "Bella, stay strong." My brother-in-law's voice wavered with emotion, mirroring the turmoil in my own heart. I wish I had understood John's pain better. Why did this happen? The weight of sorrow bore down on me, compounded by Hannah's tears as she clung to me for solace. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law's stoic glare offered no comfort, her expression devoid of tears. Amidst our collective grief, my brother-in-law and John's colleagues took charge of the funeral arrangements, their somber efficiency a stark contrast to the overwhelming emotions engulfing me. "Please wake up," I whispered to John on the day of his funeral, his serene visage in the casket belying the finality of his passing. It felt as though he could stir from slumber at any moment, if only I called out to him. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I held on him tightly, seeking refuge in his familiar presence. In the midst of my sorrow, a glimmer of curiosity stirred within me as I noticed a lone photograph resting on John's chest. Who had placed it there, and what significance did it hold in this moment of profound loss? Intrigued, I lifted the photograph, only to find John's face marred by ruthless slashes from a cutter. My heart quickened as I read the ominous message scrawled on the back. "Run away now." Questions swirled in my mind. Who was the intended recipient of this chilling warning? As a shiver ran down my spine, I turned to find my mother-in-law's icy stare fixed upon me, her gaze piercing through me with unnerving intensity. Could she be involved? The tension thickened as she hastily looked away upon meeting my gaze, sparking a surge of suspicion within me. Discreetly, I slipped the photograph into the pocket of my dress, determined to unravel the mystery. In the aftermath of the funeral, amidst the quietude that followed, my thoughts kept returning to the cryptic message on the photograph. Though the sender remained elusive, the initial ZS hinted at a possible connection. The only SS I could think of was Scarlett, my mother-in-law, Doubts gnawed at me, challenging the narrative of John's untimely demise. Desperate for answers, I resolved to confront my mother-in-law, bracing myself for the confrontation ahead. As I stepped into her home, my mother-in-law's demeanor remained as frosty as ever. With my brother-in-law absent at work, it was just the two of us in the solemn silence. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" she inquired, her tone guarded. I was hoping to uncover some insights into John's passing. "Perhaps there's a clue here in his childhood home," I replied, my words tinged with uncertainty. Lacking the courage to confront her directly, I found myself fabricating a reason for my visit. Searching for a distraction, my gaze wandered to the towering bookshelf dominating the living room. A testament to the family's love for literature, it housed not only novels but also encyclopedias and dictionaries. Among them, I spotted a few volumes from John's student days, evoking a wave of nostalgia. Curiosity getting the better of me, I reached for a couple of books, each adorned with a stamped initial indicating ownership. Beside John's J was a small, endearing image of a cuddling cat. The sight warmed my heart, a reminder of his gentle nature that always brought a smile to my face. As I perused the books, I couldn't shake off the palpable weight of my mother-in-law's gaze boring into my back. Amidst the sea of familiar titles, one book stood out, still clad in its cover. As I gingerly opened it, I discovered a tome on poisonous plants, its pages adorned with numerous post-it notes. My heart skipped a beat as I stumbled upon a note detailing the very poison that claimed my husband's life. The book bore a stamp of ownership, a damning piece of evidence that left me reeling. Summoning all my courage, I turned to my mother-in-law, brandishing the book before her. Her stoic facade crumbled as tears streamed down her face. "I'm the one responsible. Please forgive me," she choked out amidst sobs. The revelation sent shockwaves through me, but there was no time for hesitation. "We need to inform the authorities," I insisted, my voice trembling with urgency. With a heavy heart, I relayed the truth to the police. As I grappled with the gravity of the situation, my brother-in-law arrived home, oblivious to the turmoil that had unfolded. Concern etched upon his features, he questioned the somber atmosphere, his eyes darting between me and my tearful mother-in-law. "What's happened? Why is Bella here? Please tell me," he implored, his voice laced with apprehension. I wanted to talk to my mother-in-law about my husband," I stammered, my words faltering as I struggled to find the right way to broach the subject. Understanding washed over my brother-in-law's face as he listened. "Losing him must have been incredibly difficult for you. Are you feeling any better now, Bella?" he inquired gently, his concern palpable. Unable to meet his gaze, I hesitated, grappling with the weight of unspoken truths. Before I could utter a word, my brother-in-law's unexpected confession caught me off guard. "I know this isn't the time, but I've always harbored feelings for you, Bella. And Hannah, she's just so precious to me. Would you ever consider giving us a chance, starting anew?" His words hung in the air, surprising me with their sincerity. I never imagined my brother-in-law harboring such feelings. "Thank you, but I can't even fathom such thoughts right now," I replied, my voice tinged with gratitude and regret. Understanding flickered in his eyes as he accepted my response. Awkwardly scratching his head, he took the photograph from my outstretched hand. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his gaze falling upon the image of my husband's battered face and the ominous message scrawled on its reverse. As the reality of the photograph's contents sank in, my brother-in-law's complexion paled, a gasp escaping his lips. This was inside John's coffin. Who could have done such a thing? His shock mirrored my own as we grappled with the sinister implications of the discovery. "It's possible that someone at the funeral knows what happened to John," I mused aloud, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together in my mind. "Wait a moment. John took his own life, so there's no perpetrator to speak of," I reasoned, trying to quell the rising unease. However, my brother-in-law appeared perplexed, his agitation palpable as he shifted uneasily. But in my dreams, John's voice echoes, accusing someone of betrayal and expressing hatred. I divulged, watching as his eyes widened in shock, his features contorting with alarm as if confronted with a horrifying revelation. "And I found this," I continued, retrieving the damning evidence from the living room bookshelf. As I handed him the book on poisonous plants with incriminating notes, his expression morphed into one of profound concern, realizing the gravity of the situation. I presented the book on poisonous plants that I had discovered earlier, pointing out the bookplate bearing my brother-in-law's name, indicated by the stamped letter K. "What are you insinuating? Are you suggesting that I murdered my own brother?" my brother-in-law demanded, his voice tinged with disbelief. Instead of answering, I pressed on with my revelation. Beside me, my mother-in-law remained silent, her gaze fixed on the unfolding drama. "And there's more," I declared, retrieving the charm my husband had given me. Carefully, I extracted a letter concealed within. Its contents sent shockwaves through the room. "My brother killed our father with a poisonous plant." Amidst the somber atmosphere of my husband's funeral, I clung to the charm he had gifted me, finding solace in its tangible reminder of his love. Yes, I held it. A faint suspicion nudged at my consciousness. Could there be something hidden within? From the outer covering, "That's hardly substantial evidence," my brother-in-law scoffed dismissively as I retrieved a small object concealed within the charm. Undeterred, I produced my phone and played a video that revealed a damning conversation between my husband and my brother-in-law. In the footage, my brother-in-law confessed to intentionally ending his father's life. He assured my husband that he harbored no ill intent toward our family and vowed to turn himself in to the authorities. It was a shocking revelation that left me reeling with a mixture of regret and fury. My husband, in an act of foresight, had clandestinely recorded the conversation by setting up a camera in their parents' house, a fact detailed in the accompanying letter. As I absorbed the gravity of the situation, my heart burned with a potent blend of emotions. "You admitted your crime to my husband, then urged him to turn you in, only to take his life with the same poisonous plant, didn't you?" I confronted my brother-in-law, the weight of betrayal heavy in my voice. "John trusted you until the very end. Why would you commit such a heinous act?" As I pressed him for answers, my brother-in-law's demeanor shifted, his once gentle countenance contorting into a terrifying visage as he clicked his tongue in frustration, his eyes flashing with anger. In that tense moment, my mother-in-law's anguish erupted into tears, her sobs filling the room. "Why? How could you do something so cruel?" she cried out, her confession echoing the painful truth of her complicity. It dawned on me then, the origins of this tragedy rooted in the bond between the brothers. Despite their closeness in childhood, envy and resentment had poisoned my brother-in-law's heart over time, leading to a series of petty pranks aimed at undermining his talented younger sibling John. My in-laws had always maintained strict discipline with my brother-in-law, aware of his penchant for mischief. Despite this, John never harbored any resentment towards his brother, instead choosing to admire and support him. This unwavering loyalty only deepened my mother-in-law's sense of dismay. Following my father-in-law's sudden demise while tidying the bookshelf, my mother-in-law stumbled upon a book detailing poisonous plants. Despite the diagnosis of a heart attack, John had never displayed any prior heart issues during his medical checkups, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease. It was then that I noticed a bookmark nestled within the book, detailing the exact symptoms my husband had experienced before his passing, a revelation that sent shockwaves through me. Even more alarming was my brother-in-law's intense fascination with the book on poisonous plants, a detail that did not escape my notice. To add to the growing list of unsettling discoveries, my mother-in-law unearthed a photograph of John's disfigured face hidden within the pages of the book, further deepening the mystery surrounding his untimely demise. Despite her suspicions, my mother-in-law hesitated to confront my brother-in-law without concrete evidence, knowing he would likely deny any wrongdoing. At my father-in-law's memorial service, during our visit to the family home, my mother-in-law was visibly shaken to discover my brother-in-law burning our belongings. Fearing for our safety, she chose to distance herself from us, her demeanor growing cold and distant. In a moment of desperation, she confided in me, her voice strained with anguish as she explained her actions. Her face etched with worry lines, I struggled to find the right words to comfort her. Even after we stopped visiting, she recounted, my brother-in-law's behavior grew increasingly ominous. He muttered to himself, "I have to do something about John," leaving me deeply concerned. I recounted how I had tried to warn my husband at his first memorial, using the photo phone in the book about poisonous plants as a covert means of communication. I had also whispered to John about the possibility that his brother Ken may have been responsible for their father's death. Unfortunately, it seemed our attempt to warn my husband had backfired. If he hadn't been aware, he might not have confronted my brother-in-law. and perhaps things wouldn't have escalated to this extent. My mother and I were overwhelmed with regret, each of us blaming ourselves for the unfolding tragedy. I struggled to find the right words to respond to her anguish. "It's all because our father refused to let me take over the company," my brother-in-law interjected bitterly, deflecting blame onto our deceased father. "But John always stood up for you, insisting that he couldn't become president by sidelining you." I couldn't contain my frustration. As if that matters. Both our father and John loved you. There was no need for you to resort to such drastic measures. "What's the point now?" I exclaimed, my voice tinged with a mixture of anger and despair. Defiantly, my brother-in-law dismissed our accusations with a chilling expression. "Blame the parents who favored my younger brother and the facade of the good son, John. It's all your fault," he retorted, his words sending shivers down my spine. "You've taken away my beloved husband. I'll never forgive you." I seethed, my anger boiling over at my brother-in-law's callous actions. "Shut up. If you hadn't interfered, you could have been my wife," he spat back venomously, his words dripping with malice. Suddenly, he lunged at me with a knife he had concealed, the glint of metal sending the chill down my spine. Panicked, I screamed for help and attempted to flee, but he was relentless, swiftly closing the distance between us. With nowhere left to run, I found myself cornered, facing the sharp edge of the blade. Instinctively, I shut my eyes, racing for the worst. Then, a resounding thud echoed through the room as someone intervened to shield me from harm. To my astonishment, it was my mother-in-law. "Mother-in-law, are you hurt?" I gasped, seeing her grimace as blood trickled from her injured arm. "Ken, please stop this madness. Turn yourself in," she pleaded, her voice trembling with urgency. "Shut up, both of you. You're the ones who need to disappear," my brother-in-law snarled, his rage unabated. "Why would you go to such lengths, especially now that you've achieved your dream of becoming CEO?" I implored, struggling to understand his motives amidst the chaos. "I need money," my brother-in-law confessed, his desperation palpable. Despite assuming control of the company, he lacked the business acumen to manage it, burdening himself with mounting debts within a year. In a desperate bid to alleviate his financial woes, he resorted to taking out a hefty life insurance policy on my husband, his younger brother. It's amusing, really. John believed my lies so easily, even when I pretended to confess, my brother-in-law chuckled bitterly, his laughter tinged with malice. I recoiled in disgust at his callous demeanor, but even in his deceit, he remained cautious, ensuring that John didn't consume the drink he had offered. "A toast to our farewell," he sneered, his suspicions of poisonous herbs evident. Yet he did shake John's hand, unwittingly transferring traces of the lethal substance. John had a habit of licking his fingers, you know? So it's no surprise the poison began to take effect during the car ride home, my brother-in-law boasted, his voice filled with a twisted sense of triumph as he brandished a knife before us. "Despite everything, my husband still wanted to save you. Why couldn't you understand his compassion?" I exclaimed, frustration seeping into my voice. "Blame my parents for favoring John over me," my brother-in-law retorted defiantly, deflecting responsibility onto others. As tension reached its peak, the arrival of the police brought an end to the harrowing ordeal. Despite their intervention, my brother-in-law continued to struggle until the very end. My brother-in-law's desperate pleas fell on deaf ears as he gasped and finally succumbed to the authorities, his tumultuous outbursts quelled. Thankfully, my mother-in-law's injury proved to be minor, and she was quickly on the path to recovery. As my brother-in-law was escorted away by the police, it became clear that he harbored no remorse for his actions, leaving little doubt that he would face a lengthy sentence behind bars. With him out of our lives, I found solace in the comfort of my mother-in-law's embrace. Returning to her former self, my mother-in-law showered affection upon my daughter Hannah and me. Together, we forged a sense of familial harmony, finding happiness in each other's company. And as I revisited the letter concealed within the charm my husband had given me, its heartfelt message served as a poignant reminder of his enduring love. "Bella, you are my treasure. I love you always." Embracing my husband's enduring affection, I resolved to carry on, finding strength in his unwavering love and the bond shared between us.
Sister-in-law played a mean joke that reminded me of a painful past experience. I got really upset, and my family decided to stop talking to her. Now she's trying to make herself seem like the victim and turn everyone against me. Let me tell you about the situation. My husband, Aaron, and I have been together for 3 years, but we've known each other for 6. He has an older sister named Sophie, who's caused all the drama in our family recently. About 3 weeks ago, Sophie asked if I wanted to go on a vacation to Spain with her, my mother-in-law, and my husband's cousin Nadia. Nadia and I are close because we're first cousins, and we both went to the same high school. At first, I wasn't too keen on the idea of going on a trip with Sophie, but Nadia really wanted me to come, so I agreed. Sophie, who's pretty wealthy thanks to her neurosurgeon husband, was covering the cost of the flight tickets and hotel stay for our vacation. She's not bothered by the expenses because her husband's job brings in a lot of money. While she technically runs an event management company, it practically runs itself, and she doesn't really need to work. She just keeps up appearances to avoid being seen as a socialite who doesn't do anything. Despite having a degree in literature, she's never used it and feels like college was a waste of time, except for the part where she met her husband. Aaron mentioned that Sophie has always been spoiled by her parents, getting whatever she wanted since childhood. This attitude has carried into adulthood, with her thinking she can manipulate people with sulking and the silent treatment. Her husband and parents encourage this behavior, but Aaron, Nadia, and I don't tolerate it. While I've never been a fan of Sophie, I've tolerated her for the sake of family since she's never been directly mean to me. So I agreed to go on the trip with Sophie. And finally, 3 days ago, we were getting ready to leave. Since the airport was quite far from my house, I left early and ended up arriving about half an hour before our scheduled departure. With time to spare, I decided to pass the time by scrolling through my phone. Unfortunately, that morning my phone's vibration motor had stopped working, so I wasn't getting notifications like usual. I didn't have time to fix it before leaving, planning to address the issue once I got back from the holiday. Luckily, I happened to be on my phone when I received a message. It was from Sophie, who sent me a screenshot of a text conversation she had received from an unknown number. The message included an image and some text. Curious, I downloaded the image to see what it was about, as it seemed odd for Sophie to send me someone else's conversation. When I opened the image, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a picture taken right outside my house, showing someone holding a pair of scissors in their left hand. Almost immediately, I received another message from the same unknown number. "Let your brother's wife know I'm back." Sophie explained that she had received this text a few minutes ago and was worried about Aaron's safety. Hearing this sent me into panic mode. You see, I have a past experience of being stalked, which was the most frightening time of my life during college. I had a stalker who would take pictures of me from behind and send them to me all day. He didn't message me directly but used fake social media accounts to communicate. He'd suggest meeting spots but never showed up. Despite being trained in jiu-jitsu and never going out unarmed, I felt extremely scared. This went on for 2 months, and I kept it to myself out of fear. When I tried to stop him, he threatened me, saying I'd be in trouble if I told anyone. He even sent me a similar picture from outside my parents' house, holding scissors, to intimidate me further. Terrified, I didn't confide in anyone and just hoped for safety during classes. After a few weeks, I only left my dorm for necessities, and eventually, I stopped going out altogether because of the constant pictures. It wasn't until my roommate noticed something was off and pushed me to tell her that I finally opened up. Together, we went to the police to report the situation. Within a few days, they made an arrest, and surprisingly, it turned out to be a senior from the computer engineering department. He had a history of making girls uncomfortable on campus. Unfortunately, he targeted me due to his interest, using his cyber safety expertise to gather information from my public social media accounts. He was also stalking another girl who hadn't spoken up for the same reasons I hadn't. Once caught, he was expelled from college, putting an end to his harassment. Though his parents took him back home after a few days, he left the country soon after. It's been years since then, and I had almost forgotten about him until that image brought back all the fear. Without hesitation, I called 911. I urgently called Sophie to come over to my house right away. But I forgot to mention that I had already called the police because my priority was warning Aaron. Quickly, I hailed a cab and started frantically calling my husband, knowing he was likely still asleep at 8 o'clock in the morning, especially on the weekend. Despite the challenge, he eventually answered on the third attempt, sounding groggy from just waking up. With no time to waste, I instructed him to grab something heavy for protection, lock himself in the bedroom, and barricade the door. Although he seemed confused at first, mentioning the picture made him understand, and he followed my directions. I stayed on the phone with him throughout the 45-minute cab ride home, even as the police arrived and searched the house. During this time, I didn't check my phone, and without the vibration feature, I didn't receive any reminders from notifications. When I arrived home, the police were wrapping up their inspection, finding no one suspicious nearby. I was in the midst of a full-blown panic attack, and it took several minutes and half a bottle of water to finally calm down. The officers mentioned that they had checked the phone number in their system, which only came back with the name Thea Wilson. While this wasn't my stalker's name, it was entirely possible that he used a fake name for his phone number. At that moment, I had completely forgotten about Sophie and my phone, as my main relief was knowing Aaron was safe. The police informed us that they had dispatched 2 officers to apprehend the sender, following leads from the cybercrime department. Aaron and I rushed to the nearest police station, where shortly after our arrival, Sophie was brought in by 2 officers, crying uncontrollably. I'm sure many of you have already figured out what happened. And unfortunately, it's exactly what you're thinking. For some reason, Sophie thought it would be amusing to prank me this morning before our trip. A few days ago, she met a friend of mine from college, and during their conversation about families, my past stalker came up. This incident had made me somewhat infamous around campus, and despite not enjoying the attention, it seemed to have stuck in people's minds. After learning about my stalker, Sophie decided it would be funny to prank me on the morning of our flight. She used a phone number she had obtained a few days ago under a fake name specifically for this purpose. She texted herself an image that she had taken a few days prior, right in front of our house, holding scissors with an outstretched arm. Looking back at the photo, I realized the hand didn't belong to a man at all. Sophie had gone as far as removing her nail polish, making it difficult for me to notice in the midst of my panic. Fear clouded my judgment, causing me to overlook key details that hinted it was all a prank. But in the end, the trauma from my college experience overshadowed everything. The thought of reliving it terrified me, especially when Aaron's safety was at stake. It wasn't a laughing matter. Our ordeal ended with an embarrassing trip to the police station, where Sophie received a warning. Aaron and I had wasted time and energy worrying about my stalker's return when there was nothing to fear. Leaving the station, I was seething with anger. I'd unleashed my fury on Sophie for over 15 minutes, not caring as she broke down in tears. She had belittled something deeply traumatic and frightening for me, and her foolishness had embarrassed us all. She could cry all she wanted, but I refused to feel any sympathy. Aaron and I drove home that day, and during the ride, I filled Nadia in on the debacle. Even she decided to cancel the trip because, let's face it, nobody wants to spend time with someone as thoughtless as Sophie. The whole day was a struggle as I tried to calm my nerves after the chaotic morning and the lingering fear from the stalker scare. Even after learning it was just a prank, the terror lingered, bringing back memories of the darkest time in college. I kept mostly to myself that day, only speaking to Aaron and Nadia. I switched off my phone, needing a break from the chaos. It wasn't until 2 days later that I discovered my inbox flooded with messages from my mother-in-law and Sophie, accusing me of overreacting to the prank and influencing Nadia to cancel the vacation. I hadn't instructed Nadia to back out. I had only shared what Sophie had done. Her decision was her own, yet Nadia and Aaron managed to rally the family against Sophie, including her own father. Despite their belief, I hadn't spread any word about the incident. It was Nadia and Aaron who informed others, leading to the family's decision to cut ties with Sophie. They claim I owe Sophie an apology for what they see as a harmless prank, but the consequences she faces are real and painful. She's facing consequences from her own family, and now she's painting herself as the victim. After reading their messages, I discussed it with Aaron, who assured me there's no need for sympathy towards her. Neither he nor Nadia regret informing the family about the incident. What she did was undeniably cruel, far from a harmless prank. It wouldn't have been harmless if it hadn't triggered my past trauma to the point of incapacitating me for an entire day. We're all aware of the toll it took on my mental well-being. I fully agree, it wasn't harmless at all, leaving me paralyzed with anxiety. She didn't even apologize, only cried, so expecting sympathy seems hypocritical. She deserves the consequences of her actions. Initially, I planned to ignore her messages after discussing it with Aaron, as I had no desire to waste my time reasoning with her. However, she persisted in texting me repeatedly, clearly attempting to guilt-trip me into apologizing and restoring her standing within the family. It became increasingly irritating, and in a moment of frustration, I responded. I expressed my contempt for her insensitive and cruel prank, highlighting that she alone was responsible for her current situation. I clarified that I played no role in the family members cutting ties with her, though I wished I had, as it would have provided some satisfaction in removing negativity from the family. I concluded the message by referencing her weight, an area of insecurity for her. While I typically refrain from body shaming due to my own experiences with bullying, I chose to target her vulnerability in this instance to make her feel remorse. Perhaps my response was harsh, but it provided a sense of catharsis after enduring her relentless messages. Despite previously tolerating her spoiled and insensitive behavior, this incident exceeded my threshold for tolerance. After sending the text, I put my phone aside and tried to distract myself by watching a movie. It wasn't until 3 hours later that I checked my messages and found a new one from Sophie. She mentioned considering me a good friend and expected forgiveness without having to beg for it. While her message seemed to imply an apology, I found it confusing. She then criticized my response, suggesting that if I were going to be rude, I should have ignored her entirely instead of intentionally hurting her. Reflecting on her words, I began to wonder if I had gone too far. Despite my dislike for Sophie, I acknowledged that she had a point. Perhaps I shouldn't have said some of the things I did. However, her refusal to take responsibility for her actions and her attempts to shift the blame onto me only fueled my anger. I regretted stooping to shaming her for her weight, knowing firsthand how hurtful that could be. Nevertheless, I felt justified in calling her out for her behavior. Aaron believed I shouldn't apologize, asserting that Sophie deserved to be confronted. He didn't think I should sympathize with her at all. Nadia, on the other hand, felt I may have been too harsh. Feeling torn and unsure of how to proceed, I turned to the Reddit community for unbiased advice. I didn't want to resort to the same tactics as Sophie to seek revenge. While I value Aaron and Nadia's perspectives, I needed impartial judgment considering the circumstances. So I'm here seeking guidance after Scylla, in her attempt to prank me, inadvertently belittled my past trauma, prompting me to insult her insecurities about her weight. Update 1. I've taken in all the feedback from the comments on my original post, and while I appreciate everyone's viewpoints, I couldn't shake off the guilt I felt about my comment regarding Sophie's weight. So I decided to apologize to her for that specific remark. I stand by everything else I said, but attacking someone for their appearance didn't sit right with me, especially knowing firsthand the pain of being bullied for things beyond my control. I sent the apology just 5 minutes ago, although she hasn't opened it yet. Regardless, I'll be okay, even if she doesn't accept it, because I know I did what I could to make amends. As for my mother-in-law, I'm not on speaking terms with her. It baffles me why she rushed to Sophie's defense when she knows her actions were wrong. Her texts were all about understanding my frustration, but then she expected me to apologize to Sophie, which doesn't add up. It feels like she's trying to guilt-trip me into feeling sorry for Sophie, but I'm certain she wouldn't have the same reaction if the roles were reversed. Aaron wasn't thrilled about my decision to apologize, but he believes in my good intentions. Nadia, on the other hand, is supportive and proud of me, so overall, I'm at peace with my decision. Update 2. Sophie has just responded to my apology. It took several hours for her to reply, but about half an hour ago, she finally did. She said it was fine, but she didn't expect anything better from me anyway. Sophie admitted to feeling a bit shocked, but understands that we were never friends and won't be in the future. On a positive note, she did express regret for attempting to prank me and for using such a traumatic experience against me. She claimed that if she had known the consequences would be so severe, she wouldn't have gone through with the prank. Personally, I believe pranks like that are disrespectful and should never be carried out, regardless of the circumstances. However, I appreciate the apology, even if it came across as passive-aggressive. Something is better than nothing, right? Now I can let go of the guilt I felt about my own harsh words and move forward. This incident marks the end of Sophie's presence in our lives, and that's the silver lining in this whole ordeal. Update 3. Hi everyone! It's been about a month since my last update, and I have some exciting news to share. Last week, Nadia discovered that she's pregnant. To celebrate, we organized a big pregnancy announcement party and invited all our loved ones. Well, almost everyone. Sophie was noticeably absent because she's been out of touch ever since being cut off from the family. She temporarily deactivated her social media accounts and went off the grid. However, Aaron reached out to his dad, who assured us that Sophie was okay. She just needed a break from social interactions. During the party, though, Sophie sent Nadia a text extending her best wishes for a happy and healthy pregnancy. However, the message had a hint of Sophie's trademark passive-aggressiveness. She expressed a desire to be present at such a joyous occasion, but conveniently ignored the fact that she wasn't invited. Instead, she subtly implied that we were the negative influences in her life and that she was prioritizing her own well-being. We found her message amusing and decided not to share it with anyone else at the party. It's absurd how desperately she wanted to be included but refused to apologize for her actions. Despite hoping that her social media hiatus would lead to personal growth, it seems Sophie remains unchanged. Oh well, at least her message provided